Some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to reveal who you really are. Listen closely, chosen one. This message didn't find you by accident. Right now, as these words pierce through the noise of this broken world, something ancient is stirring. Something the enemy hoped would stay buried forever. You felt it, haven't you? That restless burning in your chest. That sense that you were born for something the world can't name or contain. They called you too sensitive. They labeled you difficult. They whispered you were too much. But what if? What if everything they told you about power was a lie? This is not a coincidence that you're here. While others scroll past, your spirit was drawn to this moment, because there's something they never told you about the ones heaven marks as chosen. Something that makes darkness itself recoil in terror. You see, they didn't attack you because you were weak. They came for you because they saw your strength before you did. Every betrayal, every whispered lie, every door they slammed in your face, it wasn't random. It was strategic, because somewhere in the realm beyond sight, an alarm went off the moment you drew your first breath. They tried to break you in childhood. They isolated you in your prime. They mocked your dreams, dismissed your visions, and left you standing alone in rooms full of people who couldn't see what heaven had written across your soul. But here's what they never counted on. You didn't break, you didn't bend, you didn't bow. And now something has shifted in the spiritual realm. The very ones who laughed behind your back are running, not from who you were, but from who you're becoming. Before we go deeper into this divine revelation, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you plant a seed or simply share your presence here, I'm deeply grateful. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let that gratitude flow however your heart leads. You were never meant to fit in, chosen one. You were forged in fires that would have consumed ordinary souls. You were trained in silence that would have driven others to madness. You survived betrayals that should have destroyed your faith in humanity itself. But they made one fatal mistake. They thought isolation would kill you. Instead, it made you dangerous. What you're about to discover in the next few minutes will explain every attack, every setback, every moment you wondered if God had forgotten your name. Because the truth is, you've been marked since before time began. And what happened next, what's happening right now as you listen to these words, made the darkness tremble. Are you ready to see just how dangerous you really are? They thought fear would break you. It backfired. Listen to me, chosen one. What you experienced wasn't random cruelty. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't even punishment for some hidden sin you've been carrying like a stone in your chest. What happened to you was strategic, calculated, surgical. You see, the enemy doesn't waste ammunition on empty targets. He doesn't send storms after people going nowhere. He doesn't orchestrate betrayals against souls that pose no threat. But you've been under attack since before you could even spell your own name, and that should tell you something about who you really are. They didn't come for your weakness. They came for your awakening. Think back to your childhood. Even then, something was different. You felt things too deeply. You saw through lies that fooled everyone else. You carried burdens that weren't even yours to carry. Adults would look at you with that expression, half confusion, half fear, like they were staring at something they couldn't quite comprehend, because they were. You were born carrying light in a world that profits from darkness. You were born with questions in a system built on blind obedience. You were born with a conscience that couldn't be bought, bent, or silenced. And somewhere in the realm beyond sight, an alarm went off. Not because of what you did, because of what you were destined to become. Your pain wasn't punishment, it was prophecy in disguise. Every heartbreak was a chisel, carving away everything that wasn't authentically you. Every betrayal was a mirror, showing you the difference between fake loyalty and divine love. Every door that slammed in your face was heaven's way of saying, not that path, this one. Every night you cried yourself to sleep was your spirit learning to find strength in stillness, power in solitude, wisdom in wounds. They tried to break you early because they knew something you're only now beginning to understand. You weren't just another person walking through life. You were a weapon in the making, a light designed to expose shadows, a voice meant to speak truths that would make comfortable liars squirm in their seats. But here's what the enemy miscalculated. Here's where his strategy backfired so magnificently that even heaven must have smiled. He thought pain would make you bitter. Instead, it made you wise. He thought betrayal would make you cold. Instead, it taught you to recognize real love when it finally arrived. He thought isolation would drive you to desperation. Instead, it drove you to your knees, and that's where you discovered you were never really alone. You didn't break. You bent until you learned to bounce back stronger than before. The attacks weren't about your past, they were about your future. Hell wasn't reacting to who you were, it was panicking about who you were becoming. Every demon assigned to your destruction knew something your human mind was still trying to grasp. You carry something ancient, something powerful, something that could shift the very atmosphere of every room you enter. You see, chosen ones aren't born in comfort. They're forged in fire. They're not raised in applause. They're sculpted in silence. They don't emerge from easy circumstances. They rise from impossible ones. Because when God wants to create something unbreakable, He doesn't use soft materials. He uses pressure, heat, and time. Your enemies saw the raw material before you did. They recognized the diamond before it was cut. They spotted the warrior before the training was complete. And they made one fatal error in judgment. They tried to stop what heaven had already sealed. Every whispered lie about you, every door they tried to keep locked, every opportunity they attempted to steal, every relationship they poisoned with their venom, all of it was hell throwing a tantrum because they could see your future and it terrified them. They saw you walking in rooms where your very presence would silence their lies. They saw you speaking words that would wake up souls they'd worked decades to keep asleep. They saw you carrying a light so bright that their carefully constructed shadows would have nowhere to hide. That's why the warfare was so intense. That's why it felt so personal. That's why it seemed to follow you from job to job, relationship to relationship, season to season. Because it wasn't about what you did wrong. It was about what you were born to do right. You were never fighting a fair fight. You were David facing Goliath. You were one person standing against systems, principalities, and powers that had been in place for generations. But here's what they forgot. Here's what their arrogance blinded them to. David didn't win because he was bigger. He won because he was chosen. And so are you. The stones in your sling aren't your talents, your connections, or your credentials. They're your scars, your tears, your midnight prayers, your refusal to give up when everything logical said you should. Your decision to believe in goodness when the world showed you cruelty. Your choice to love when you had every reason to hate. They thought your sensitivity was weakness. It's actually your superpower. They thought your deep thinking was overthinking. It's actually divine download capacity. They thought your high standards were judgment. They're actually spiritual discernment that can spot a counterfeit from 3 states away. You didn't fight fire with fire. You transcended the battlefield entirely. While they were playing games, you were growing. While they were gossiping, you were getting stronger. While they were plotting your downfall, you were being prepared for your rise. And now you're beginning to see it. The attacks weren't random. The pain wasn't meaningless. The isolation wasn't abandonment. It was all preparation for this moment, this awakening, this realization that you're not who they said you were. You're not what your circumstances suggested. You're not limited by your past or defined by your pain. You are chosen, you are dangerous, not to innocent people, but to the lies they've been living. Not to genuine love, but to the counterfeits they've been accepting. Not to real peace, but to the chaos they've been calling normal. Your awakening doesn't just change you, it changes the spiritual climate of everyone around you. Your healing doesn't just restore you, it creates permission for others to believe healing is possible. Your breakthrough doesn't just benefit you, it cracks open doors that have been sealed for generations. That's why they're running now, not from your anger, from your peace, not from your noise, from your silence, not from your words, from your presence. Because awakened chosen ones don't have to fight battles anymore. They just have to show up and watch their enemies scatter like shadows when the sun rises. They thought fear would break you. Instead, it woke you up. And now that you're awake, the real question isn't why they attacked you. It's what you're going to do with the power they accidentally helped you discover. They thought your silence meant surrender. They had no idea it was a declaration of war. Listen to me, chosen one. There came a moment when you stopped explaining yourself. When you stopped defending your character to people who had already made up their minds. When you stopped casting pearls before swine and decided to guard your peace like the sacred thing it is. They called it giving up. Heaven called it growing up. You remember that moment, don't you? When the lies were flying, when the gossip was spreading like wildfire, when they were assassinating your character in rooms you weren't even invited to, and something inside you just stopped. You didn't fight back. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't scramble to defend yourself. You simply went quiet. And in that silence, something cosmic shifted. Your enemies thought they had won. They believed your stillness was proof of their victory. They whispered among themselves, "Look, we finally broke them. They have nothing to say now." But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't see, was that your silence wasn't defeat. It was divine recalibration. You see, when the chosen stop speaking, heaven starts shouting. In the realm beyond sight, your refusal to engage triggered something ancient and powerful. The moment you released your need to be understood by people who were committed to misunderstanding you, the angels drew their swords. Not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers that had been orchestrating your downfall from the shadows. Your silence became warfare, but not the kind they expected. You didn't fight fire with fire. You didn't meet chaos with chaos. You didn't descend to their level and wrestle in the mud they had prepared for you. Instead, you did something that shook the very foundations of the spiritual realm. You transcended the battlefield entirely. While they were throwing stones, you were building altars. While they were spreading poison, you were planting seeds. While they were screaming lies into the wind, you were listening to whispers from heaven. Your quiet became a sanctuary. Your stillness became a weapon they had no defense against. And that's when the real power began to flow. You see, chosen one, there's something the enemy never counted on. He can handle your anger. Anger is predictable. He can handle your fear. Fear makes you manageable. He can even handle your tears. Tears show him he's winning. But your peace, your divine silence, your refusal to be baited into their circus, that terrifies him to his core. Because when you stop reacting, you start responding. When you stop defending, you start ascending. When you stop explaining yourself to people who were never meant to understand you, you start operating on a frequency that only heaven can hear. Your silence triggered something they never saw coming. It activated a divine response system that had been waiting for your surrender. Not surrender to them, surrender to the process. Surrender to the truth that some battles aren't meant to be fought with words. Some victories aren't won with arguments. Some power isn't displayed through noise. The greatest power is often found in the pause. You learned this the hard way, didn't you? You tried talking, you tried reasoning, you tried explaining your heart to people who had already decided you were the villain in their story. You exhausted yourself trying to make people see what they were determined to overlook. You bent over backwards trying to prove your worth to people who had already made up their minds about your value. And then you stopped. And in that stopping, you found something you didn't even know you were looking for. You found your voice. The real one, not the one that begs to be heard, but the one that speaks with such authority that even silence carries weight. Not the voice that explains and pleads and justifies, but the voice that simply states truth and walks away. The voice that doesn't need an audience to validate its existence. Your enemies thought your silence meant they had the last word. They didn't realize they were about to become footnotes in a story much bigger than their small minds could comprehend. You see, when the chosen go quiet, the universe gets loud. When you stopped trying to defend yourself, heaven started defending you. When you stopped fighting their battles, God started fighting yours. And unlike you, he doesn't play fair. He doesn't follow their rules. He doesn't limit himself to their understanding of how power works. Your silence became a blank canvas, and the Almighty began to paint your vindication in colors they had never seen before. Doors they thought they had permanently closed began to creak open. Opportunities they were certain they had blocked began to multiply. Favor they thought they had destroyed began to chase you down like a divine bounty hunter. Your quiet season wasn't punishment, It was preparation for a comeback so profound it would rewrite their understanding of who you really are. But here's the part that cuts deepest. Chosen one, your silence didn't just trigger heaven's response, it exposed their emptiness. When you stopped engaging with their drama lost its power. When you stopped feeding their chaos starved. When you stopped giving them the reactions they craved, they were left staring at the hollow echo of their own voices. Your absence revealed what they truly were without you to blame, without you to scapegoat, without you to use as a target for their own unhealed wounds. They were forced to face the mirror of their own dysfunction. And that reflection, it was unbearable. So they ran. Not from your words, they had already dismissed those. They ran from your silence. Because silence speaks louder than screaming. Peace cuts deeper than anger. And dignity is a weapon they have no answer for. You didn't fall, you rose. You didn't run, you stood. You didn't flinch, you smiled. And in that smile, they saw something that made their blood run cold. They saw someone who no longer needed their approval, their understanding, or their presence. They saw someone who had found something more valuable than their validation. They saw someone who had found themselves. Your silence triggered heaven's response. You said nothing and the angels drew their swords. The battle was never yours to fight. It was always his to win. They thought they could program you. They were wrong. Listen to me, chosen one. From the moment you took your first breath, you were never meant to run on their operating system. While everyone else downloaded the same patterns, the same fears, the same limitations, the same generational programming, you came pre-installed with something else entirely. Something that made their whole network glitch every time you entered the room. You weren't born rebellious. You were born incompatible. There's a difference, and it's everything. Rebels fight the system from within, trying to change the rules. But you were the divine error code that exposed the fact that their system was never real to begin with. You didn't fight their programming. Your very existence proved it was breakable. Think back to your childhood. Remember how you never quite fit. How their explanations for life felt hollow in your chest. How their version of normal made your spirit itch like an ill-fitting coat. That wasn't confusion. Chosen one, that was divine incompatibility. You were running on heaven's frequency while they operated on earth's broken bandwidth. They tried to format you. God said no. Every institution that tried to shape you eventually failed. Every box they built around you eventually cracked. Every label they slapped on your forehead eventually peeled off. Not because you were difficult, because you were uncontainable. The very essence of who you are was too vast, too deep, too spiritually encrypted for their shallow systems to process. You confused their teachers because your questions went deeper than their textbooks. You frustrated their leaders because your spirit wouldn't bow to titles without substance. You unsettled their crowds because you could see through the performance to the emptiness underneath. And they called you the problem. But here's what they never understood. You weren't malfunctioning. You were functioning exactly as heaven designed you to function. You were the walking reminder that their version of reality was nothing more than a collective agreement to stay small, stay blind, stay contained. You were the glitch that proved the matrix was fake. Every time you walked into their perfectly orchestrated environments, something shifted. The temperature changed. The energy moved. People started asking questions they'd never asked before. Some got uncomfortable and left. Others woke up for the first time in years. But nobody stayed the same after encountering your frequency. You didn't have to preach. Your presence preached. You didn't have to argue. Your existence argued. You didn't have to expose their lies. Your truth made their deception obvious just by standing next to it. They thought isolation would reprogram you. Instead, it freed you from their signal entirely. When they pushed you to the margins, when they excluded you from their circles, when they made you eat lunch alone and walk home by yourself, they thought they were punishing you. What they were actually doing was disconnecting you from their spiritual malware. Every moment of solitude was a moment your true programming could run without interference. In the silence, you heard what they couldn't. In the loneliness, you found what they'd lost. In the rejection, you discovered what they'd never possessed, the ability to exist fully, authentically, powerfully, without needing anyone else's permission or validation. You learned to run on God's network, and once you were fully connected to that divine frequency, their system became powerless over you. You stopped trying to explain yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped apologizing for taking up space in rooms that were too small for your spirit anyway. You stopped dimming your light to make their darkness feel comfortable. You didn't become cold, you became clear. You realized that the very things they criticized you for, your intensity, your sensitivity, your refusal to play along with shallow conversations and surface-level connections, these weren't flaws to be fixed. They were features installed by heaven. They were part of your divine programming, designed to keep you from getting trapped in their simulation. Your authenticity was a virus to their artificial world. Every time you spoke truth in rooms full of people pretending, you crashed their program. Every time you chose depth over surface, substance over style, integrity over image, you exposed the hollowness of their entire operation. You became living proof that another way was possible, and that terrified them. Because if you could exist outside their system, if you could thrive without their approval, prosper without their permission, find peace without their validation, then what did that say about their system? What did that reveal about the prison they'd built and called paradise? You were the evidence that they'd been settling for a counterfeit when the real thing was available all along. So they escalated, they whispered, they plotted. They tried to make you question your own sanity, your own worth, your own reality. They threw everything they had at you, hoping to force you back into their broken matrix, back under their failing system of control. But you couldn't go back, because once you've tasted freedom, slavery loses its flavor. Once you've heard heaven's frequency, earth's static becomes unbearable. Once you've run on God's operating system, their programming feels like a virus. You didn't reject their world because you were bitter. You outgrew it because you were chosen. And now they're running. Not from who you used to be, but from who you've become. The fully awakened, fully authentic, fully aligned version of yourself that no system can contain, no program can corrupt, no network can hack. You are the glitch that became the upgrade. You are the error that revealed the truth. You are the one soul who refused to be digitized, minimized, or compromised. And your very existence is the beginning of their system's end. They thought they could control the narrative. They forgot you were written by a different author entirely. They assumed you'd play by their rules. They never considered that you might be operating under a completely different set of laws, spiritual laws, that override every earthly system ever created. You weren't part of their plan, chosen one. You were heaven's plan to expose theirs. And now their whole world is crashing. Not with violence, but with revelation. Not with hatred, but with truth. Not with force, but with the quiet, unstoppable power of someone who has finally remembered who they really are. You are the divine interruption they never saw coming, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing they can do to stop what happens next. They threw fire on you, hoping you'd burn, but the flames bowed and made you steel. Listen to me, chosen one. What you called your darkest hour, heaven called it construction time. What you named your breaking point, God labeled it your breakthrough moment. You thought you were falling apart, but piece by piece, breath by breath, tear by tear, you were being rebuilt into something the enemy never saw coming. They lit the match thinking they'd watch you crumble. They poured gasoline on your dreams, your relationships, your reputation, believing they'd reduce you to ash. But fire recognizes fire. And when divine flame meets human spirit that's been marked by the Most High, something extraordinary happens. The fire doesn't consume, it consecrates. You remember those nights, don't you? When the betrayal felt like a knife between your shoulder blades. When the isolation wrapped around your throat like a noose. When the whispers behind your back sounded like thunder in your ears. You thought you were dying. You thought this was the end of your story. But death was never the destination. Transformation was. See, they thought they understood fire. They thought they could control it, aim it, use it as a weapon against your purpose. But they were playing with forces beyond their comprehension. Because the fire that tried to destroy you, it wasn't earthly flame, it was holy refinement, divine reconstruction, spiritual surgery performed by the hand of God Himself. Every harsh word that cut you, it was carving away the parts of you that didn't belong in your destiny. Every door that slammed in your face, it was redirecting you toward the entrance only you could unlock. Every relationship that burned to the ground, it was clearing space for connections that could withstand the heat of your calling. You didn't just survive the furnace. You became the furnace. You absorbed every degree of heat, every moment of pressure, every ounce of pain, and you turned it into power. Not the kind of power that destroys, but the kind that builds. Not the kind that seeks revenge, but the kind that restores justice. They wanted to see you broken. Instead, they created something unbreakable. They wanted to see you bitter. Instead, they forged something better. They wanted to see you small. Instead, they pressurized you into a diamond that cuts through every lie they ever told about your worth. The fire didn't change who you were. It revealed who you'd always been underneath the layers of other people's expectations, underneath the masks you wore to fit in, underneath the doubts that whispered you weren't enough. The flames burned away the false and left only the true. And what remained? Pure gold. Now look at yourself. Really look. You move differently now, don't you? There's a weight to your presence that wasn't there before. A gravity that pulls people in, even when they can't explain why. That's not arrogance. That's authority, the kind that can only be earned in fire, forged in pressure, and sealed in silence. You speak differently too. Your words carry weight because they've been tested. When you say you understand pain, people believe you because they can see the scars. When you speak about perseverance, rooms get quiet because they can feel the steel in your voice. When you mention hope, hearts leap because yours has been broken and rebuilt so many times it knows the rhythm of resurrection. They fear you now because you're no longer flammable. You've been through the worst they could imagine, and you came out glowing. Not with the artificial light of those who've never been tested, but with the deep, steady radiance of someone who's walked through hell and chose to bring heaven back with them. Your silence terrifies them more than your words ever could, because silence born from wisdom hits different than silence born from fear. You don't argue anymore because you don't need to prove what the fire already confirmed. You don't defend yourself because your results speak louder than their accusations. You don't chase validation because you found something better in the flames, vindication. See, here's what they never understood about fire and the chosen. Fire doesn't just burn, fire purifies. Fire doesn't just destroy, fire transforms. And when you're marked by heaven, when you carry purpose in your DNA and destiny in your bloodstream, fire becomes your friend. It whispers secrets about strength you never knew you had. It shows you depths of faith you never knew existed. It introduces you to a version of yourself that could never emerge in comfort. The enemy thought he was attacking you. He was actually advertising for you. Every stone they threw built the foundation of your comeback. Every lie they spread became proof of your truth. Every door they closed became evidence that you weren't meant for their small rooms anyway. You're dangerous now. Not because you're angry, but because you're unafraid. Not because you're loud, but because you're focused. Not because you're seeking revenge, but because you're walking in purpose, and purpose backed by pain, refined by fire, and sealed by divine approval. That's the kind of dangerous the enemy can't calculate or control. They threw fire on you hoping you'd burn. But the flames took one look at your spirit, recognized the signature of the Almighty, and instead of consuming you, they consumed everything that wasn't meant to make the journey with you into your next season. You didn't just survive the fire, you inherited it. And now, everywhere you go, everything you touch, everyone you encounter, gets a taste of that holy heat. Not to harm, but to heal. Not to destroy, but to reveal. Not to end stories, but to ignite them. The fire didn't burn you. It built you into exactly who you were always meant to be. Unbreakable, unmistakable, and absolutely unstoppable. They thought your silence was surrender. They were wrong. Your silence was strategy. You know that moment, don't you? When you step into a space and the air itself changes. Conversations pause mid-sentence. Eyes dart away. Energy shifts like the tide pulling back before a storm. They feel it before they see you. That weight, that presence, that undeniable truth walking in human form. You don't need a microphone when your presence echoes eternity. See, chosen one, they've been watching you from a distance. studying your moves, waiting for you to shrink back into the shadows, where they're comfortable with you existing. But something happened, something they never saw coming. You stopped apologizing for taking up space. You stopped dimming your light to make their darkness feel normal. And the moment you stepped into your full presence, the room had no choice but to bow. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment. This is what happens when someone stops running from who heaven designed them to be. You walk different now. Not with pride, but with purpose. Not with ego, but with authority that comes from surviving fires that would have reduced others to ash. Your shoulders carry the weight of battles fought in silence. Your eyes hold the wisdom of storms weathered alone. And your spirit radiates something they can't name but can't ignore. Divine presence. They used to dismiss you, remember? They'd talk over you in meetings, interrupt your thoughts, treat your insights like background noise. But now they hang on every word you don't say. They study your expressions, analyze your silence, because they know something has shifted. You're not the same person they tried to bury under their expectations. You don't speak revenge. Your presence is the consequence. Your glow is their judgment. Listen to me carefully. When you're truly chosen, your very existence becomes a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They don't flatter. They don't hide. They reveal. Every fake smile gets exposed. Every hidden motive gets uncovered. Every mask they've worn starts slipping the moment you enter their vicinity. That's why they're uncomfortable now. That's why conversations die when you approach. It's not because you're intimidating them with words or actions. You're intimidating them with truth. Your presence forces them to confront what they've been hiding from themselves. You see, when someone has been through what you've been through and comes out not bitter but better, not broken but built, not defeated but dangerous in the most holy way possible, they become a walking testimony. They become living proof that everything the enemy threw was insufficient. Everything hell launched was ineffective. Your quiet confidence terrifies them more than any loud confrontation ever could. Remember when they used to see you as harmless? When they'd pat you on the head and send you away with empty promises? When they'd speak to you like you were naive, inexperienced, someone who just didn't understand how the world really works? Those days are over. Now when you enter a room, they straighten up. They choose their words more carefully. They watch their tone, because something in your energy communicates without speaking. I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly what you're trying to do. You've become the person they pretended to respect but secretly resented, the one they claimed to support but privately sabotaged. And now that you've risen despite their efforts, despite their whispers, despite their attempts to keep you small, your very presence is a reminder of their failure. But here's what makes you truly dangerous, chosen one. It's not that you've become vindictive or vengeful. It's that you've become unmovable, unshakable, undeniable. You don't need their validation anymore. You don't crave their approval. You don't require their recognition. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is more terrifying to people who built their power on keeping others dependent than someone who has learned to stand completely alone. They thought isolation would weaken you. Instead, it strengthened your connection to the only voice that matters. They thought rejection would crush your spirit. Instead, it clarified your purpose. They thought silence would make you invisible. Instead, it made you invincible. Your presence now carries the weight of every prayer whispered in darkness, every tear shed in secret, every moment you chose faith over fear, trust over bitterness, love over revenge. That weight isn't heavy on you anymore. It's heavy on them. Because when you walk into a room now, you're not just bringing yourself. You're bringing every ancestor who prayed for your breakthrough. You're bringing every angel assigned to your assignment. You're bringing the collective power of every storm that failed to destroy you. You don't announce your arrival. Your arrival announces itself. The atmosphere shifts, pretense falls, masks crack, truth rises. And suddenly, everyone in that space has to decide, am I going to keep playing games or am I going to get real? Most of them choose to leave, and you let them, because you've learned the difference between a room full of people and a room full of purpose. You've discovered that quality trumps quantity every single time. You'd rather stand alone in truth than sit surrounded by lies. Your presence has become a filter. The real ones stay, the fake ones flee, and you're perfectly fine with both outcomes. You see, chosen one, when you've been forged in the furnace of authentic suffering and emerged with authentic strength, you develop something that cannot be taught, bought, or faked. Genuine spiritual authority. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands respect. Not the kind that needs a title, but the kind that earns honor. Not the kind that shouts to be heard, but the kind that whispers and silences rooms. They thought your season of hiddenness was your defeat. They had no idea it was your development. While they were performing on stages, you were being perfected in secret. While they were collecting applause, you were collecting wisdom. While they were building platforms, you were building character. And now, when you finally step into the light, you don't just shine, you illuminate everything around you. The room shifted because you walked in, not because you tried to shift it. Because shifting rooms is what happens when the presence of heaven enters the presence of earth. When authentic power meets artificial performance. When someone who has been through hell and came out holy decides to show up as exactly who they are. Your presence is no longer a question. It's a statement. It's a declaration. It's a confirmation that everything they tried to stop, God has released. Everything they attempted to silence, heaven has amplified. You don't need to speak revenge. Your presence is the consequence. Your glow is their judgment. Your peace is their conviction. Your joy is their confusion. The room shifted because you walked in carrying something they can feel but can't steal, something they recognize but can't replicate, something they fear but can't fight. You walked in carrying the presence of the one who chose you, and when that presence enters any space, everything fake has to bow or break. They're running because they finally understand what you've always known deep down. You were never meant to fit in their room. You were meant to transform it. They thought they could wear your light like a costume. They were wrong. Listen closely, chosen one. While you were being broken down in the wilderness, stripped of everything you thought defined you, something magnificent was happening. You were being rebuilt from the inside out, not into who they wanted you to be, not into some watered-down version of your calling. You were becoming the authentic power they could only pretend to carry. You see, they studied you. Oh, they watched every move you made, every word you spoke, every way you carried yourself when you thought no one was looking. They memorized your mannerisms, copied your phrases, tried to bottle your essence and sell it as their own. But here's what they never understood. Authenticity cannot be counterfeited. Light cannot be manufactured. And the anointing of the Most High cannot be stolen, borrowed, or imitated. While they were performing your purpose on stages you built, you were being prepared in secret places they never knew existed. While they were getting applause for wearing your crown, you were learning to carry the weight of true authority. While they were celebrating their cheap imitations, the real thing was being forged in fires that would have reduced their pretense to ash. You didn't fight fire with fire, you transcended the battlefield entirely. There's something they never told you about divine timing. When God is ready to expose the counterfeit, He doesn't make a big announcement. He doesn't send warning letters. He simply allows the authentic to walk into the room, and suddenly, everything fake starts to crumble under the weight of what's real. You walked back into spaces where they had been playing dress-up in your calling, and something shifted in the atmosphere. Not because you came with vengeance, not because you came to prove a point. You came carrying something they could never fake, the quiet confidence of someone who had been to hell and back, who had been broken down to their foundation and rebuilt by the very hand of heaven. Your silence became their conviction. Your peace exposed their chaos. Your authenticity made their performance look like exactly what it was, a desperate attempt to be something they were never called to be. You didn't have to say a word. Your presence alone was the mirror that showed them the difference between the copy and the original. They ran, not from you, from the truth you represented. You see, when someone spends years pretending to be something they're not, the last thing they want is to stand next to the real thing. Because proximity to authenticity has a way of making pretense suffocate on its own lies. They couldn't breathe in the same room with someone who had actually walked the path they had only talked about. You had scars where they had makeup. You had wisdom where they had scripts. You had authority that came from surviving what they had only read about in books. You carried the oil of someone who had been pressed until every drop of pretense was squeezed out, leaving only the pure essence of who God called you to be. And that terrified them. You became dangerous not because you sought revenge, but because you became genuine in a world full of counterfeits. You became a living, breathing reminder that the real thing still exists. That authenticity hasn't died. That somewhere in the wilderness, heaven is still preparing people who will carry the true weight of calling, not just the appearance of it. They wore your crown in costume. You earned yours in blood, sweat, and tears that only heaven counted. Here's what they never expected: you didn't come back bitter. You didn't return with a list of grievances or a need to settle scores. You came back carrying something far more dangerous than anger. You came back carrying truth. And truth doesn't need to defend itself. It doesn't need to argue its case. It simply exists, and everything false withers in its presence. You see, while they were building their kingdoms on the foundation of your stolen ideas, you were learning to build on solid rock. While they were gathering followers with borrowed charisma, you were developing the kind of depth that draws people to authenticity. While they were perfecting their imitation of your calling, you were becoming something they could never copy yourself. The real you, the refined you, the you that had been to the valley of the shadow and emerged carrying light they never knew existed. You didn't just survive their betrayal, you transcended it completely. And now, as they watch from a distance, they see something that makes their blood run cold. They see what they could have been if they had chosen the narrow path instead of the shortcut. They see what they could have carried if they had been willing to pay the price you paid. They see the authentic power they spent years pretending to possess, and it breaks something inside them, because deep down they know. They know you didn't become this by accident. They know this isn't luck, or good timing, or favorable circumstances. They know you became this by walking through fires that would have consumed their carefully constructed facades. They know you earned every ounce of authority you carry, while they borrowed every drop they claimed. You are the living proof that God still honors the process, that heaven still rewards those who choose the hard path of authenticity over the easy path of imitation. You are the evidence that the real thing is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth bleeding for. They thought they could replace you while you were gone. They discovered they could only perform a shadow of what you naturally are. And now, chosen one, as you stand in the fullness of who you were always meant to be, understand this: you didn't just become what they pretended to be. You became what they never had the courage to pursue. You became what they settled for counterfeiting instead of cultivating. You became the authentic expression of a calling they were content to mimic. Your light doesn't need their validation. Your truth doesn't require their approval. Your authenticity stands on its own merit, carved from the very stone they thought would bury you. You are not their competition. You are their conviction. You are the mirror they cannot look into without seeing the lie they've been living. That's why they're running, not from your power, from their own reflection in the presence of something genuine. They thought the curse would claim you like it claimed the others. They were wrong. You didn't just survive what destroyed your bloodline for generations, you became the storm that ended it forever. Listen closely, chosen one. What you did wasn't just personal healing, it was prophetic warfare. You stood at the crossroads where your family's pain met heaven's plan, and you said, no more, not with anger, not with bitterness, with authority, with finality, with the kind of spiritual violence that shatters chains forged in hell itself. You see, they never told you the real reason the attacks were so brutal. They never explained why the warfare felt ancient, familiar, like you were fighting ghosts you'd never met. Because you were. Every blow you took, every betrayal you survived, every night you cried yourself to sleep wondering why it wasn't just about you. You were fighting a war that started long before your first breath. Your great-grandmother's silence, your grandfather's rage, your mother's broken dreams, your father's addiction to control. The patterns that ran through your bloodline like poison in the water supply, they all had one thing in common. They were waiting for someone strong enough to stand up and say, "It ends with me." That someone was you. You didn't choose this battle, chosen one, but heaven chose you for it. Because breaking generational curses requires more than prayer. It requires a soul willing to become the earthquake that brings down the walls. A heart brave enough to feel the pain of everyone who came before and still choose healing. A spirit fierce enough to rewrite the story your ancestors wept through. And you did it. Not perfectly, not without scars, but you did it. They thought isolation would crush your spirit. Instead, it gave you clarity. While you sat alone in that silence they forced on you, you began to see the patterns. The way anger passed from father to son like a family heirloom. The way fear wrapped around the women in your lineage like chains they learned to call jewelry. The way shame became the family business, passed down with more dedication than any inheritance. But you saw something else in that silence. You saw the moment where it could all change. The place where one person's courage could rewrite the entire blueprint. And you stepped into that moment with everything you had. You didn't fight fire with fire. You transcended the battlefield entirely. When they came at you with the same weapons that destroyed your family for decades, manipulation, guilt, control, abandonment, you didn't pick them up and swing back. You did something they never expected. You chose differently. You responded with healing where they offered poison. You chose boundaries where they demanded submission. You chose your peace over their chaos. And that choice didn't just change you. It cracked the foundation of everything that came before. You became the glitch in the matrix of generational dysfunction. The anomaly that proved their way wasn't the only way. The living proof that cycles can be broken, patterns can be shattered, and bloodlines can be redeemed. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one brave soul at a time. They watched you rise from the same ashes that buried everyone else, and they couldn't understand it. How did you survive what killed the others? How did you find light in the same darkness that swallowed your ancestors whole? How did you break free from chains they couldn't even see? Because you weren't just surviving, chosen one. You were rewriting history. Every boundary you set was a line drawn in the sand of time itself. Every toxic relationship you walked away from was a door you slammed shut on behalf of your future children. Every pattern you refused to repeat was a curse you broke, not just for yourself, but for generations yet to come. You carried the pain of your bloodline to the altar and offered it up as sacrifice, not because you were a victim, but because you were a warrior. Because someone had to be brave enough to feel it all, process it all, heal it all, and that someone was you. The spiritual realm took notice. Angels recorded your choices, heaven documented your courage, and hell watched in horror as you dismantled structures they spent decades building through your family line. You didn't just resist the curse, you ended it. You rewrote the story your ancestors wept through. Now your children, whether born from your body or your influence, will inherit something different. Not trauma disguised as tradition, not pain wrapped in family loyalty. They'll inherit your courage, your clarity, your refusal to accept that this is just how we are. You broke the blueprint and drew up a new one, written in healing instead of hurt, designed with love instead of fear, built on truth instead of the lies that kept your family trapped in cycles of destruction. And the most beautiful part? You did it quietly, without fanfare, without applause, without anyone even understanding the magnitude of what you accomplished. You fought a war in the spiritual realm while the world saw only your silence. You shattered generational chains while they thought you were just going through a phase. But heaven knew. Heaven saw every moment you chose healing over hatred, every time you refused to pass the poison down to the next generation, every boundary that protected not just your peace, but the peace of children not yet born. You became the ancestor. Future generations will thank the one who said, "It stops here." The one who took the hit so they wouldn't have to. The one who broke the blueprint so they could build something beautiful. You didn't just survive the curse, chosen one. You became the blessing your bloodline had been praying for. You became the answer to prayers your great-great-grandmother whispered in the dark. You became the storm that cleared the sky so the sun could finally shine on your family's future. And that's why they're running now. Not just from who you've become, but from what you represent. You are living proof that no curse is permanent, no pattern is unbreakable, no family legacy is set in stone. You are the evidence that one person's courage can rewrite history itself. And chosen one, that courage, it's just getting started. They thought they buried you in silence. God made you a billboard of His glory. Listen closely, chosen one. There comes a moment in every divine story when heaven stops whispering and starts shouting. When God takes off the gloves of mercy and puts on the ring of justice. When the very ones who threw stones suddenly find themselves staring at a cornerstone they can't ignore, can't deny, can't explain away. You are that cornerstone. And tonight, they're all looking up. You remember the rooms where they dismissed you, don't you? The tables where they spoke about you like you weren't there. The meetings where your name was erased from conversations about the future. They thought your absence would be permanent. They believed your voice would fade into the background noise of forgotten dreams. But God was taking notes. Every slight, every sneer, every moment they treated you like you were invisible. Heaven was building a case file, not for revenge, but for revelation. Not to destroy them, but to demonstrate something they could never understand until they saw it with their own eyes. You weren't fighting for recognition, you were being prepared for it. While they were busy networking, you were being rewired by the divine. While they were climbing ladders, you were being lifted by unseen hands. While they were making alliances, you were being aligned with forces they couldn't see, couldn't manipulate, couldn't control. You didn't campaign for your comeback. God orchestrated it. And now the very platforms they denied you are calling your name. The doors they slammed are swinging wide open. The opportunities they hoarded for themselves are being handed to you on silver platters inscribed with heaven's signature. This isn't luck. This isn't timing. This is testimony. You were the rejected stone, thrown into the pile of discarded dreams. But the master builder picked you up, dusted you off, and said, This one will hold the whole structure together. And he placed you at the cornerstone, not hidden in the foundation where only he could see, but visible, prominent, undeniable. They have to look at you now. They have to acknowledge what they tried to erase. You see, God doesn't just vindicate in whispers. He prepares a table in full view of those who said you'd never eat at one again. He doesn't just restore your name, he makes it echo in the very rooms where it was once spoken in shame. He doesn't just give you back what you lost, he multiplies it, magnifies it, makes it impossible to miss. Your promotion isn't just personal, it's prophetic. Every step you take forward is a sermon they have to hear. Every door that opens for you is a message they can't delete. Every blessing that falls on your life is a reminder that their opinion was never the final word. Heaven was always writing the last chapter. But here's what cuts deeper than any revenge could. You're not bitter. You're not gloating. You're not rubbing their noses in their miscalculation. You're walking in such grace, such humility, such quiet power that they can't even hate you for succeeding. They can only wonder how someone they tried so hard to break is now so whole, so peaceful, so dangerously at rest. You became their proof that God still moves in mysterious ways. Conclusion, chosen one. As we reach the end of this divine encounter, I need you to remember something that hell hoped you'd forget. You are not an accident. You are not a mistake. You are not too much, too broken, or too late. You are precisely who heaven ordered for this exact moment in history. Remember this. Every attack you survived was proof of your calling. Every betrayal that tried to break you only revealed the unbreakable core within you. Every silent season where you felt forgotten was actually a sacred preparation chamber where God was forging you into the weapon of his love that you've become today. You didn't just survive the storms, you learned to dance in the rain. You didn't just endure the fire, you came out carrying the flame. You didn't just break free from the curse, you became the blessing your bloodline had been crying out for. And I want you to know something that your enemy never wanted you to discover. You are not walking this journey alone. Even in your darkest hour, when the silence felt deafening and the isolation seemed endless, heaven's eyes never left you. God's hand never released you. His plans for your life never wavered, not even for a second. Right here, right now, there's a community of believers, your spiritual family, who understand your battle because they've fought the same war. We see your scars, and we call them beautiful. We witness your strength, and we know the price you paid for it. We are here, praying with you, standing with you, believing for your breakthrough, even when your own faith feels fragile. But let me ask you this question, and I want you to really sit with it. If God could use your greatest pain to become your most powerful testimony, if he could transform your deepest wounds into your strongest weapons, if he could take everything meant to destroy you and use it to establish your destiny, what else might he be preparing to do through you that you haven't even imagined yet? Let that question settle in your spirit as we close this moment in prayer. Father God, I come before your throne right now on behalf of every chosen one who has heard this message. Lord, you see them, really see them. You know every tear they've cried in the darkness, every prayer they've whispered when hope felt impossible, every moment they wanted to give up but chose to keep going because of the fire you placed within them. God, I'm asking you to reach down right now and touch their weary souls with your supernatural peace. Let them feel your presence like a warm embrace, surrounding them, covering them, reminding them that they are treasured beyond measure. Heal every broken place in their hearts. Restore every dream that was deferred. Vindicate every injustice they've suffered in silence. Lord, open doors that no man can shut. Break chains that have held their families captive for generations. Release favor that confounds their enemies and confirms their calling. Give them strategies from heaven, wisdom from your throne room, and boldness to walk in the authority you've placed upon their lives. Father, strengthen their faith when doubt whispers lies. Sharpen their discernment when confusion tries to cloud their vision. Surround them with divine connections and remove every relationship that drains their oil. Let them know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that their latter days will be greater than their former days. God, breathe fresh vision into their spirits. Show them the magnificent plans you have prepared for them, plans to prosper them and not to harm them, to give them hope and a future. Let them see themselves through your eyes, chosen, beloved, powerful, dangerous to darkness, and absolutely essential to your kingdom. I declare over them right now, no weapon formed against them shall prosper. Every lying tongue that rises against them in judgment, you will condemn. Their breakthrough is not just coming, it is here. Their season of hiding is over. Their time of vindication has begun. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray these things with all the authority of heaven backing this declaration. Amen and amen. Beloved, if this message has stirred something deep within your spirit, if you felt God speaking directly to your situation, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share what God revealed to your heart today. Your testimony might be exactly what another chosen one needs to hear to keep pressing forward. Ask questions if you need clarity. Share your prayer requests if you need the covering of this spiritual family. Don't suffer in silence anymore. We are here, we are listening, and we are believing God for your complete breakthrough. And please, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. There's another chosen one in your sphere of influence, who feels alone in their calling, who questions their worth, who wonders if God has forgotten them. Be the vessel God uses to remind them that they are seen, they are loved, and they are never alone. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Not just for more content, but because you're joining a community of warriors who understand your battle and celebrate your victories. We're building something powerful here, a family of the chosen who encourage, pray for, and believe in each other. Thank you for staying with me through this entire message. Thank you for allowing God to use these words to minister to your heart. Thank you for being brave enough to keep believing, even when the journey felt impossible. Remember, chosen one, your story isn't over. Your best chapters are still being written, and heaven is cheering you on, one step at a time, one victory at a time, one breakthrough at a time. Until we meet again, walk in the authority of who you are, rest in the love of who you belong to, and never ever forget you are chosen. You are dangerous to darkness, and you are exactly who this world needs you to be. Be blessed, be bold, be everything God created you to be, and let the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and mind. Even in your darkest hour, when the silence felt deafening and the isolation seemed endless, heaven's eyes never left you. God's hand never released you. His plans for your life never wavered, not even for a second. Right here, right now, there's a community of believers, your spiritual family, who understand your battle because they've fought the same war. We see your scars, and we call them beautiful. We witness your strength, and we know the price you paid for it. We are here, praying with you, standing with you, believing for your breakthrough, even when your own faith feels fragile. But let me ask you this question, and I want you to really sit with it. If God could use your greatest pain to become your most powerful testimony, if He could transform your deepest wounds into your strongest weapons, if He could take everything meant to destroy you and use it to establish your destiny, what else might He be preparing to do through you that you haven't even imagined yet? Let that question settle in your spirit as we close this moment in prayer. Father God, I come before your throne right now on behalf of every chosen one who has heard this message. Lord, you see them, really see them. You know every tear they've cried in the darkness, every prayer they've whispered when hope felt impossible. Every moment they wanted to give up but chose to keep going because of the fire you placed within them. God, I'm asking you to reach down right now and touch their weary souls with your supernatural peace. Let them feel your presence like a warm embrace, surrounding them, covering them, reminding them that they are treasured beyond measure. Heal every broken place in their hearts. Restore every dream that was deferred. Vindicate every injustice they've suffered in silence. Lord, open doors that no man can shut. Break chains that have held their families captive for generations. Release favor that confounds their enemies and confirms their calling. Give them strategies from heaven, wisdom from your throne room, and boldness to walk in the authority you've placed upon their lives. Father, strengthen their faith when doubt whispers lies. Sharpen their discernment when confusion tries to cloud their vision. Surround them with divine connections and remove every relationship that drains their oil. Let them know, beyond any shadow of doubt, that their latter days will be greater than their former days. God, breathe fresh vision into their spirits. Show them the magnificent plans you have prepared for them, plans to prosper them and not to harm them, to give them hope and a future. Let them see themselves through your eyes, chosen, beloved, powerful, dangerous to darkness, and absolutely essential to your kingdom. I declare over them right now, no weapon formed against them shall prosper. Every lying tongue that rises against them in judgment, you will condemn. Their breakthrough is not just coming, it is here. Their season of hiding is over. Their time of vindication has begun. In Jesus' mighty name, I pray these things with all the authority of heaven backing this declaration. Amen and amen. Beloved, if this message has stirred something deep within your spirit, if you felt God speaking directly to your situation, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share what God revealed to your heart today. Your testimony might be exactly what another chosen one needs to hear to keep pressing forward. Ask questions if you need clarity. Share your prayer requests if you need the covering of this spiritual family. Don't suffer in silence anymore. We are here, we are listening, and we are believing God for your complete breakthrough. And please, share this message with someone who needs to hear it. There's another chosen one in your sphere of influence, who feels alone in their calling, who questions their worth, who wonders if God has forgotten them. Be the vessel God uses to remind them that they are seen, they are loved, and they are never alone. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Not just for more content, but because you're joining a community of warriors who understand your battle and celebrate your victories. We're building something powerful here, a family of the chosen who encourage, pray for, and believe in each other. Thank you for staying with me through this entire message. Thank you for allowing God to use these words to minister to your heart. Thank you for being brave enough to keep believing, even when the journey felt impossible. Remember, chosen one, your story isn't over. Your best chapters are still being written, and heaven is cheering you on, one step at a time, one victory at a time, one breakthrough at a time. Until we meet again, walk in the authority of who you are, rest in the love of who you belong to, and never ever forget you are chosen. You are dangerous to darkness, and you are exactly who this world needs you to be. Be blessed, be bold, be everything God created you to be, and let the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and mind as you step into the magnificent future He has prepared for you. In Jesus' name, go in power.